A perfectly preserved face from millennia ago is frozen in a silent scream. Some historical discoveries do more than rewrite a textbook. They reach across time to deliver a genuine chill. This video explores 20 mysterious finds that truly scared the archaeologists who unearthed them, revealing why these objects sparked a primal fear that science alone could not explain. You will gain a new perspective on the past, seeing it not as a settled record but as a collection of unsettling enigmas. How could an ancient battery exist 2,000 years before electricity was invented? And what secret does a book hold that has resisted every modern attempt to read it? Each piece of evidence we uncover seems to hint at realities we have forgotten. What does it feel like to hold an artifact that simply should not exist? That silent scream belonged to a figure known only as Unknown Man E. Discovered in a hidden royal cache at Deir el-Bahari in Egypt, this mummy was unlike any other found alongside it. While the pharaohs rested in serene, dignified poses, this individual's face was contorted in a final, horrifying expression of agony, his mouth stretched wide as if frozen mid-scream. The treatment of the body was equally disturbing. Instead of the careful, ritualistic wrappings meant to guide a soul to the afterlife, his limbs were crudely bound with thick leather cords, a practice that seemed less about preservation and more about restraint. To the archaeologists who first gazed upon him, it felt as if they had uncovered not a peaceful passing, but a moment of pure terror captured for eternity. The deviation from all known Egyptian burial customs was what truly unnerved experts. This was not a simple case of a disrespectful burial, it was a deliberate and fearful act. The ancient embalmers had taken extraordinary measures, packing the body in sheepskin, a material considered ritually impure, and sealing it inside a coffin that bore no name, no titles, no prayers for the afterlife. Every step seemed designed not to honor this individual, but to contain him. The visceral reaction from those in the tomb was immediate, a deep, human response to witnessing raw panic preserved across 3,000 years. It was a haunting window into an ancient moment of dread that modern science struggled to explain. Forensic analysis only deepened the mystery. There was no obvious physical trauma to account for the agonized expression. This led researchers down a path of unsettling theories. Was Unknown Man E poisoned with a substance that caused painful, convulsive muscle contractions at the moment of death? Could he have been buried alive, awakening in the suffocating darkness of his own tomb? Or was he perhaps a traitor, a cursed prince, or someone so feared that his community believed his spirit needed to be bound forever to prevent his return? The absence of a clear answer is what makes this discovery so profoundly chilling. It forces us to confront the fact that some stories from the past are not tales of glory, but whispers of fear so potent they shaped the rituals of the living for the one who had passed. While the scream of Unknown Man E speaks of a forgotten human terror, another discovery whispers of a different kind of forgotten power. In the outskirts of Baghdad, Iraq, during the 1930s, workers uncovered something that looked utterly mundane at first glance, a collection of simple clay jars. But inside these vessels, archaeologists found a puzzling assembly, a copper cylinder sealed with asphalt, and within it, an iron rod. To the untrained eye, it was just curious junk, but to a researcher with knowledge of basic chemistry, it looked eerily familiar. It bore a striking resemblance to a primitive galvanic cell, the core component of a battery. When the jars were experimentally filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar or grape juice, they did something extraordinary. They generated a small but measurable electric current. The implications of this were staggering, and for the historians who understood them, genuinely unsettling. Here was potential evidence that a form of electrochemistry was understood and possibly utilized nearly 2,000 years before scientists like Alessandro Volta would officially invent the battery in the early 1800s. This artifact, now known as the Baghdad Battery, did not just fill a gap in our historical knowledge, it blasted a hole in the accepted timeline of human technological progress. The fear this object inspired was not one of horror, but of profound intellectual vertigo. It forced experts to confront a deeply uncomfortable question: what if our understanding of ancient science is fundamentally incomplete? The accepted narrative is one of linear advancement, where each era builds upon the last. But the Baghdad Battery suggests a different possibility: that sophisticated concepts could arise, be used for a time, and then vanish from the collective memory of civilization, leaving no trace in the historical record except for a few enigmatic objects. This idea that knowledge itself can be lost is a uniquely chilling thought for the modern mind, which places such faith in the permanence of discovery. It implies that our current technological age is not a guaranteed peak, but merely one point on a much longer and more mysterious curve. Researchers were left to wonder, if this was a battery, what was its purpose? The leading theory suggests it could have been used for electroplating, applying a thin layer of gold or silver onto other metals for decorative or ceremonial objects. A small current is all that is needed for this process, and it would explain the presence of such finely gilded artifacts from the same period that have long puzzled experts. Other theories propose it might have been used in medical practices, for a mild analgesic effect, or even in religious rituals, where the mysterious tingling sensation of a small shock could have been interpreted as a divine touch. Regardless of its exact use, the Baghdad Battery stands as a quiet, potent symbol of a forgotten science. It challenges our arrogance about the present and humbles our view of the past. The archaeologists who studied it were not frightened by a ghost or a curse, but by the realization that the ancient world might have held secrets of power we are only now relearning. It is a fear born not from what we see in the artifact, but from what we cannot see, the vast, silent library of lost knowledge it represents. This shifts our perspective from finding answers to confronting the weight of the questions we have not even thought to ask. A lost language is one thing, but an entire book written in a script that no one on Earth can read is something else entirely. This is the profound and unsettling mystery of the Voynich manuscript, a codex that has stubbornly resisted comprehension for over a century. Discovered in 1912 by rare book dealer Wilfrid Voynich in a European monastery, the volume immediately stood apart. It is a dense book of over 200 vellum pages, filled from edge to edge with elegant, looping handwriting in an alphabet that matches no known language on Earth. The text flows in a confident, practiced hand, suggesting it conveys real information, yet every attempt to crack its cipher has ended in failure. This is not a simple substitution code. It is a fully developed linguistic system that modern cryptographers, including those who broke Nazi codes during the Second World War, have found utterly impenetrable. The fear this book inspires is not of something malevolent, but of something profoundly unknowable, an intellectual black hole that swallows every theory sent its way. The illustrations only deepen the eerie confusion. The pages are adorned with vivid, meticulous drawings that are just as alien as the text. There are detailed paintings of plants that do not correspond to any known botanical species on our planet, their leaves and flowers arranged in impossible configurations. Other sections feature intricate astrological charts showing unfamiliar constellations and celestial cycles, and perhaps most strangely, pages filled with what appear to be small, nude female figures bathing in or connected by a complex network of green, tube-like structures, reminiscent of an ancient biological or alchemical diagram. These images suggest a coherent, sophisticated system of knowledge, a complete guide to a world that is both recognizable and utterly foreign. For the scholars who have dedicated their lives to it, the the manuscript presents a unique form of terror, the fear of a door that will not open. It confronts our modern certainty that with enough data and processing power, any puzzle can be solved. This book defies that assumption. It whispers of a possible lost civilization with its own advanced botanical and astronomical science, a culture that vanished without leaving a trace in any other historical record. More fringe, and for some, more frightening theories have suggested it could be a work of automatic writing, a glimpse into an altered state of consciousness, or even a relic of contact with a non-human intelligence. The possibility that it is an elaborate, centuries-old hoax is almost as disturbing, implying that an unknown creator possessed both the artistic skill and the cryptographic genius to fabricate an entire universe of fake knowledge that could fool experts for generations. The true fear lies in the silence. The Voynich manuscript does not threaten, it simply exists, holding its secrets in plain sight. It represents the limits of human understanding, a tangible reminder that there are still pages in the story of our world that we cannot read. This book does not contain forbidden knowledge in a dramatic sense, but it guards a forgotten one, and the void of its meaning is what continues to unnerve everyone who encounters it. It is a mystery that humbles our intellect and expands our imagination, forcing us to wonder what entire chapters of history might be written in languages we have not yet learned to hear. From the silent pages of an unreadable book, we journey to the sunken wreckage of a Roman-era ship, where a different kind of mystery lay waiting beneath the waves. In the year 1900, sponge divers working off the coast of the tiny Greek island of Antikythera were exploring a deep-water shipwreck when they brought up a heavily corroded lump of bronze and wood. To their eyes, it was just another piece of sea-encrusted debris, perhaps a weathered rock or a shapeless statue fragment. It was set aside with the other artifacts, an unremarkable find in a trove of marble and bronze sculptures. But years later, as conservators began the delicate work of cleaning, the crust broke away to reveal something that would send a shockwave through the world of archaeology. Inside was not a solid object, but a complex clockwork assembly of precisely interlocking bronze gears, finely marked dials, and tiny, cryptic inscriptions. It was a machine, and its existence in a ship that sank around 100 years before the Common Era was quite simply impossible. The device, now known as the Antikythera Mechanism, has been called the world's first analog computer. Through painstaking analysis using advanced imaging technology, researchers have slowly decoded its functions. This wasn't a tool for war or a simple timepiece. It was a sophisticated astronomical calculator. By turning a hand crank on its side, a user could predict the positions of the sun, moon, and known planets, forecast lunar and solar eclipses with remarkable accuracy, and even track the cycles of ancient athletic games like the Olympics. It modeled the irregular motions of the moon, accounted for celestial cycles that take decades to complete, and presented this cosmic data on a series of beautifully engraved dials. The engineering precision was breathtaking, with gear teeth cut at precise angles to mimic the mathematics of the heavens. For the archaeologists and historians who first grasped its purpose, the emotion was a potent mix of awe and genuine intellectual fear. This single artifact shattered the comfortable narrative of technological progress. It proved that a level of mechanical sophistication we associate with the clockmakers of 18th century Europe had been achieved in the ancient Mediterranean, and then that knowledge had vanished from the face of the earth for over 1,000 years. The terror of the Antikythera Mechanism is not found in a curse or a grimacing face, but in the chilling silence that followed it. This device was not a one-off experiment. It represented a peak of engineering and scientific thought. Who built it? For whom was it intended? What other marvels of geared technology existed in the workshops of ancient Greece or Rome that were lost to time, their bronze melted down, their wooden frames crumbled to dust? The mechanism forces a humbling and frightening reevaluation. It suggests that entire schools of advanced engineering, entire libraries of mechanical knowledge, could rise, flourish, and be utterly erased, leaving behind only this one salvaged hint from a shipwreck. It evokes the fear that history is not a steady accumulation of knowledge, but a fragile thread where dark ages can swallow centuries of innovation. We look at this intricate, corroded bundle of gears and see not just an ancient calculator, but a ghost of a forgotten world, a stark reminder of how much of our own story lies forever silent on the ocean floor of time. High above the arid plains of southern Peru, the desert floor itself begins to speak in a language of giants. This is the home of the Nazca Lines, a sprawling gallery of geoglyphs so vast they defy comprehension from the ground. For centuries they remained hidden in plain sight, their full forms known only to the dry wind and the blazing sun. Then, in the 1920s and 30s, commercial pilots began flying over the region, and what they saw from their cockpits sent a ripple of awe and deep unease through the world of exploration. Stretching across nearly 200 square miles of the Pampa Colorado were enormous, precise depictions of a hummingbird, a spider, a monkey, a condor with wings outstretched, and a strange humanoid figure now called the astronaut, alongside countless straight lines, trapezoids, and spirals that ran for miles across the landscape. The sheer scale was terrifying in its implication. Here was a monumental art project, executed with mathematical precision, that could only be fully appreciated from a vantage point its creators could never have physically achieved. The immediate question, and the source of the primal fear it sparked, was a simple one: why? What drove an ancient civilization to move millions of tons of dark surface stones to reveal the lighter earth beneath, orchestrating a labor of generations to create images only visible to the gods in the sky? For the archaeologists who first mapped them, the lines presented a paradox that bordered on the supernatural. The precision was engineering on a colossal scale. Many of the straight lines run flawlessly for over 30 miles, maintaining their course across hills and valleys without deviation. The animal figures are composed of single, unbroken contours, their proportions perfect despite being drawn on a canvas miles wide. This required not just artistic vision, but sophisticated surveying techniques, a level of coordination and communal purpose that seemed to transcend practical need. The fear was not of a malevolent force, but of an intellectual void, the unsettling realization that a society we thought we understood might have been operating under a set of priorities and capabilities so alien that our modern frameworks for meaning simply fail to apply. Theories about their purpose are as vast as the drawings themselves. Some researchers propose they were a gigantic astronomical calendar, with lines pointing to celestial events like solstices or the rising of important stars, turning the entire desert into an observatory for tracking time and seasons. Others suggest they were sacred pathways, walked during ritual ceremonies to connect with deities or ancestral spirits, the very act of traversing the lines being a form of prayer or pilgrimage. The most haunting theory, and the one that most directly fueled the pilot's sense of dread, is that they were messages intended not for humans, but for beings who viewed the earth from above. This idea that the lines were a form of communication with celestial watchers forces us to confront the possibility that the Nazca people's world included entities for whom they would willingly reshape their world. This shifts the lines from being a mysterious artifact to being a signal, and a signal implies a hoped-for receiver. The landscape thus becomes quietly terrifying, not for what it is, but for the silent question it poses: who were they trying to call, and did they ever get an answer? The true fear the Nazca Lines inspire is one of profound scale and lost intent. We look down upon the spider and the hummingbird, and we see recognizable forms, but their context is a universe away. They represent a civilization that invested its greatest collective effort into a project with no apparent economic, defensive, or domestic utility, a project whose full glory its own people could never witness. This challenges our most basic assumptions about human motivation and societal purpose. It leaves us with a desert etched with elegant, silent questions, a permanent reminder that the past is not a puzzle to be solved, but a conversation in a language we have only begun to hear. While the Nazca Lines seem to call out to the sky, another artifact suggests someone was already answering with a map of the entire world. In the year 1929, during the conversion of a former imperial palace in Istanbul into a museum, a curator made a discovery that would quietly upend the history of geography. Tucked among neglected documents was a fragment of a world map drawn on gazelle skin parchment and dated to the year 1513. It was signed by an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis, who noted in the margins that he had compiled it from 20 different source charts, including some that were incredibly ancient. At first glance, it was a remarkable piece of 16th century Ottoman scholarship, but a closer look revealed details that were, for historians of exploration, utterly terrifying. The map accurately depicts the Atlantic coastlines of Europe, Africa, and the Americas with a precision that should not have been possible for its time. It shows islands in the Caribbean that European explorers had only just encountered, but the most chilling feature lies at the very bottom of the fragment. There, drawn with shocking clarity, is the northern coastline of a southern continent, a landmass we now call Antarctica. The problem, and the source of the profound fear this map inspires, is a matter of ice. Antarctica has been entombed under a thick continental ice sheet for at least 6,000 years, and likely for millions. Its true coastal outline has been completely invisible to human eyes since long before the dawn of recorded civilization. Modern sonar mapping of the bedrock beneath the Antarctic ice, conducted in the mid-20th century, confirmed a staggering fact. The Piri Reis Map's depiction of Queen Maud Land matches the actual subglacial coastline with an accuracy that seems beyond coincidence. This presented scholars with an impossible equation. How could a 16th century admiral, working with source maps from even earlier periods, possibly know the shape of a continent that had been hidden under miles of ice since before human memory? The fear this provokes is not of a ghost, but of a ghost civilization. The most rational yet deeply unsettling explanation is that Piri Reis had access to source maps copied and recopied over millennia, originating from a seafaring culture so ancient it existed in a pre-glacial epoch. This implies a global maritime network with the skill to undertake transoceanic voyages and the scientific knowledge to accurately chart the world, including a continent that was, at that distant time, potentially ice-free. The thought that such an advanced, globe-spanning civilization could rise, map the entire planet, and then vanish so completely that it left no definitive trace in the archaeological record is a concept that chills the field of history to its core. It suggests that our entire timeline of human discovery is merely the latest chapter, a rediscovery of lands already known and charted in a forgotten age. The map forces a confrontation with the fragility of knowledge. A single parchment fragment, a copy of a copy of a copy, becomes the sole surviving whisper of a world we never knew existed. Historians and cartographers who study it are left with a vertiginous feeling, staring at a document that politely, insistently, informs them that their understanding of the past is not just incomplete, but perhaps fundamentally wrong. The Piri Reis Map does not shout its mystery. It simply sits in a museum case, a silent, elegant rebuke to our assumptions. It asks us to consider who, in the deep shadows of prehistory, looked upon a green Antarctica and decided to chart its shores for a future that would forget them entirely. The silent, perfect maps of a lost world give way to another kind of perfect geometry, one buried not in ice but in jungle soil. In the lush river deltas of Costa Rica during the 1930s, workers for the United Fruit Company were clearing dense forest to make way for banana plantations when their machetes struck something impossibly hard. As they dug away the thick earth, they uncovered not rock outcroppings but smooth, spherical forms. They had found the first of what would become hundreds of stone spheres, ranging in size from a few inches to over 8 feet in diameter, with the largest weighing an astonishing 16 tons. These were not naturally occurring boulders worn smooth by rivers. They were artifacts of deliberate, breathtaking craftsmanship. Their surfaces were polished to a high sheen, and their geometry was so precise that modern measurements show them to be nearly perfect spheres, with deviations of less than a fraction of an inch. For the archaeologists who later studied them, this mathematical perfection was the first source of a deep, creeping unease. Here was evidence of a sophisticated society capable of complex stonework, yet one that left behind no written records, no quarries with half-finished spheres, and no tools that could explain how such precision was achieved. The spheres seemed to have simply appeared fully formed from the jungle floor. The fear they inspired was not of a malevolent force, but of an intellectual void. A civilization advanced enough to produce these objects had to have existed, yet it remained almost completely invisible in every other way. How do you study a people who speak only through perfect stone circles? The mystery only deepened with their original placement. Many of the spheres were found arranged in geometric patterns, often in groups of 3 or more, forming straight lines, triangles, or parabolic curves aligned with the cardinal directions. Some were situated on top of burial mounds, while others seemed to mark the entrances to important dwellings or ceremonial sites. This careful positioning strongly suggests they held profound cultural or cosmological significance. They may have been symbols of celestial bodies, markers for astronomical observations, or physical representations of a society's belief in harmony, unity, and geometric perfection. Their silent, grouped arrangements felt like a sentence in a language where every other word has been erased. To stand among them is to feel the weight of a lost conversation, a ritual or an alignment with the stars that we can no longer decipher. The greatest source of fear for researchers was the sheer impossibility of their creation. The granite from which they are carved is incredibly hard. Without metal tools, how did the ancient sculptors shape them? The leading theory involves a painstaking process of heating the stone with fire, then rapidly cooling it with water to create fracture lines, followed by endless hours of pecking and grinding with other, harder stones, and finally a meticulous polishing with sand. The process for a single large sphere could have taken a generation to complete. This represents an unimaginable investment of communal labor and skill for objects with no apparent utilitarian purpose. They were not weapons, not tools, not building materials. They were created solely to be what they are, perfect forms placed with intention. This challenges our modern, pragmatic view of history. It forces us to accept that a society's greatest achievement might be an expression of pure ideology, an offering to concepts of order and the cosmos that we can no longer fully grasp. The stones are a cultural enigma that resists interpretation precisely because they are so complete. They offer no broken pieces to reassemble, no failed experiments to study. They are a finished statement from a lost world, and their silent, flawless presence in the jungle is a humbling reminder that some chapters of the human story are written not in words, but in shapes, and those shapes can guard their meanings forever. Buried beneath a modern Scottish football field lay a slab of stone that seemed to chart the heavens themselves. This is the Cochno Stone, a massive sandstone panel measuring over 40 feet across, and when it was first properly uncovered in the late 19th century, the sight of its surface left researchers in a state of profound unease. Carved into the rock are over 90 intricate symbols, a dense tapestry of spirals, concentric circles, and mysterious cup marks connected by meandering grooves. These are not random scratches. They are the sophisticated cup and ring markings common across Neolithic Europe. But here they achieve a scale and complexity that feels overwhelming, even intentional in its cosmic design. To stand before it is to stand before a map of a universe we can no longer read, a language of stone written 5,000 years ago. The fear it sparked was not of a physical threat, but of an intellectual abyss, the realization that this sprawling artwork represented a symbolic system of immense importance that has been utterly lost to time. The sheer density of the carvings suggested a purpose far beyond simple decoration. Some researchers saw in the interconnected rings and channels a representation of celestial movements, a prehistoric observatory carved in stone to track the cycles of the sun, moon, and stars. Others interpreted the spirals as portals or pathways, symbols of a spiritual journey between worlds, or perhaps a depiction of a mythological creation story. The most unsettling aspect was the clear intentionality. This was not a single artist's doodle. It was a communal project of staggering effort, requiring generations to peck and grind into the hard rock, all to create a permanent message for the future. Yet that message is now silent. For the archaeologists who studied it, the stone became a mirror reflecting their own ignorance. They could measure the depth of each cup, map every groove, but they could not hear the stories, the prayers, or the astronomical data it was meant to hold. It was a complete sentence from a forgotten language, and its very perfection was what made it so terrifying. This confrontation with an undecipherable code, etched with such care, hinted at a Neolithic mind every bit as complex and contemplative as our own, but oriented towards a world we cannot reconstruct. In a move that only deepened its mystery, the stone was reburied in the 1960s to protect it from vandalism and weathering. After a brief re-excavation for study in recent years, it was covered once more with earth and turf. This act of deliberate concealment feels deeply symbolic, as if modern society, unable to comprehend its secrets, chose to hide them away again. The Cochno Stone now rests silently beneath a green field, a dormant cosmic map waiting for a time when its symbols might once again be understood. It leaves us with a haunting question. What profound understanding of the universe did these ancient astronomers or spiritual seekers possess that they felt compelled to encode it so permanently in the land? And why does their silent stone feel so much like a question we are still afraid to answer? Deep within a layer of ancient limestone in Texas, a simple hammer was found waiting. In the year 1934, near the town of London, Texas, a couple walking along a creek bed made a discovery that seemed impossible. Protruding from a solid rock outcrop, they found the head of a hammer, its wooden handle partially embedded and strangely transformed. The rock itself was dated by geologists to the Cretaceous period, a time over 100 million years ago when dinosaurs still roamed the earth. The hammer, however, looked entirely modern. This artifact, now known as the London Hammer or the London Artifact, became a source of profound unease for researchers who examined it, not because of any supernatural aura, but because of what its existence logically implied. If the geological dating was correct, then a tool of unmistakably human design was sealed inside stone that formed long before the earliest ancestors of humans are believed to have appeared on the planet. The details of the hammer only deepened the chilling paradox. The iron head was of a distinctive design with a slightly tapered, rounded pole and a curved claw, a style consistent with American hammers from the late 19th century. Yet the wooden handle was partially mineralized, its structure having undergone a process where the organic material begins to turn to coal, a transformation that requires immense pressure and time. Analysis of the iron revealed another startling fact. It was unusually pure, lacking the slag inclusions typical of ancient ironworking, but also missing the additives of modern industrial steel. It was a metallurgical anomaly, a piece of metal that did not fit neatly into any known historical period. For archaeologists, this object presented a terrifying intellectual crisis. It was not a vague shape that could be interpreted as a natural formation. It was a clearly manufactured tool, found in a context that defied every established narrative of human technological and biological evolution. The fear this hammer inspires is a quiet, profound one, the fear of a single piece of evidence that could unravel the entire tapestry of deep time. The established timeline is clear. Complex toolmaking is the hallmark of our genus Homo, which emerged only in the last few million years. The idea that a being capable of forging iron and crafting a sophisticated tool existed in the age of the dinosaurs strikes at the very foundation of paleontology, anthropology, and geology. It forces a horrifyingly simple either-or question. Either our methods for dating the rock are catastrophically wrong, or our understanding of life's history on Earth is missing an entire, unimaginable chapter. This is not the fear of a monster, but the fear of a footnote that could rewrite the entire book. Proponents of conventional science offer explanations that try to tuck the hammer back into the known timeline. The most common theory suggests that highly mineral-rich water could have cemented the hammer within a much younger, concretionary rock that formed around it, making it appear far older than it truly is. This process can happen relatively quickly in geological terms, yet for those who have studied the site and the artifact, this explanation feels insufficient, a tidy answer for a profoundly messy mystery. The transformation of the wood and the specific composition of the iron resist easy dismissal. The London hammer, therefore, endures not as proof of ancient astronauts or lost civilizations, but as a permanent question mark. It represents the ultimate archaeological nightmare, a clean, simple object in a dirty, complex context. It sits in a museum now, a small, unassuming thing that carries the weight of 1,000,000 years of doubt, silently asking us how confident we truly are in the story we tell about our own beginnings. A perfect hammer out of time forces us to question our own history, but what if an artifact pointed to a history that was never ours at all? In the remote Bayan-Ha Mountains of China, a story emerged in the 1930s that sounded less like archaeology and more like the plot of a science fiction novel. A Chinese archaeologist, Kai Pu-Te, reportedly discovered a series of carefully arranged caves containing neat rows of skeletons. These remains were said to be of unusually small stature, with large, oversized skulls. But the truly chilling finds were not the bones but what was buried with them. Scattered throughout the caves were hundreds of stone discs, each roughly a foot in diameter, with a perfectly round hole in the center. At first glance, they resembled primitive stone records or grinding wheels, but upon closer inspection, they revealed a feature that made no sense. Each disc had a fine, continuous spiral groove running from the center hole out to the rim. A groove so precise and minute it seemed impossible to have been carved by hand with the technology of any known ancient culture. The initial reports claimed that when examined under magnification, these grooves were not mere decorations. They were actually a continuous line of microscopic hieroglyphic characters, a tiny script etched into the stone itself. For the archaeologists involved, the theoretical implications of this were existentially terrifying. If true, this was not just an anomalous object, it was a recorded message, and the alleged translation of that message is what sparked a deep, paradigm-shattering fear. The story, as it was later circulated by researchers like Tsum Nui, claimed the hieroglyphics told a harrowing tale. They described a group of beings called the Dropa who, long ago, crash-landed their spacecraft in the inhospitable mountains. Unable to repair their vessel, the survivors were stranded on Earth, encountering hostility from local tribes and struggling to survive in the harsh landscape. The discs were said to be their recorded account, a plea for understanding or a log of their doomed expedition left behind with their own resting places. This narrative, of course, directly proposes evidence of extraterrestrial contact in humanity's deep past. The fear this idea provoked in the archaeological community was not necessarily a belief in the story, but the profound disruption its mere possibility represented. An artifact like this doesn't just add a new page to the history book, it suggests the book was written by entirely different authors. It threatens to upend not only historical timelines but theological and philosophical foundations about humanity's place in the cosmos. The thought that researchers might be holding physical proof that we are not alone and never have been is a weight of responsibility that carries its own unique dread. The controversy and subsequent investigations only added layers of unsettling mystery. Mainstream archaeology widely dismisses the Dropa Stones as an elaborate hoax or a case of mistaken identity, perhaps involving known-by discs, which are ceremonial jade objects with center holes but no spiral inscriptions. The original discs, researchers note, have never been made available for independent, verifiable study by the broader scientific community, and key figures in the story are difficult to trace. This lack of concrete evidence, however, does not fully erase the chilling allure of the tale. For those who first encountered the reports, the stones represented the ultimate borderland between science and speculation. They forced a confrontation with the question of what we are truly prepared to discover. Is archaeology only equipped to find things that fit within our established understanding of human civilization? The terror of the Dropa Stones lies in their proposal of a reality beyond earthly explanation, a narrative so vast it reduces all of human history to a single, recent chapter in a much older and stranger galactic story. They embody the fear of the outlier, the artifact that refuses to be categorized, whispering of visitors from the stars and leaving us to wonder if some discoveries are too world-breaking to ever be comfortably proven. The silent suggestion of alien visitors is a cosmic mystery, but a more earthly yet equally impossible feat of engineering stands firm in the high Andes. In Peru, the fortress of Sacsayhuamán guards the hills above the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, and its walls are a sight that physically stops visitors in their tracks. They are constructed from enormous blocks of limestone, some weighing over 100 tons, each one a unique, irregular polygon. Yet these colossal stones fit together with a precision that defies belief. The joints are so tight, so seamlessly interlocked, that you cannot slide a piece of paper or even a single blade of grass between them. This monumental puzzle was assembled without a single drop of mortar, relying entirely on the perfect cut and placement of each individual piece. For the Spanish conquistadors who first saw it, and for modern archaeologists who study it, these walls provoked a deep, respectful fear, not of a spiritual force, but of a technological mastery that seemed to belong to a different world entirely. The construction techniques remain one of history's greatest enigmas. How did the Inca, who did not use the wheel, have no iron tools, and possessed no written language for complex engineering plans, achieve this? The stones are not simply stacked, they are intricately shaped with subtle bevels, concave recesses, and protruding nubs that lock into corresponding sockets on the neighboring block. This is not crude stonework, it is a three-dimensional jigsaw of monumental scale, designed with an understanding of seismic activity, as the interlocking forms allow the walls to flex and settle during earthquakes without collapsing. This level of foresight and skill feels anachronistic, as if a modern engineering firm had been transported back in time. The fear it inspired in early discoverers was the fear of the inexplicable. They were confronted with evidence of a knowledge system so advanced that it had no clear precedent or explanation within the known archaeological record of the region. This gap between the artifact and our understanding of its creator's capabilities led to theories that straddle the line between science and myth. Some researchers have proposed the use of a now lost plant-based compound that could soften stone, allowing workers to mold the granite like clay before it hardened again. Others point to incredibly patient techniques using stone hammers, sand, and water to slowly grind each block into its perfect shape over years of labor. Yet even these explanations struggle to account for the sheer scale, precision, and logistical genius of moving these titans from quarries miles away and up steep mountainsides. For many, the perfection of the walls felt so superhuman that it invited legends of divine assistance or contact with advanced beings. The stones themselves seem to whisper of a forgotten dialogue between humanity and the very bones of the earth, a dialogue conducted in a language of geometry and physics we have since forgotten. To stand before the Sacsayhuamán walls is to feel a humbling awe. They are a testament not to brute force, but to brilliant, patient intellect and a profound unity of purpose. They evoke a quiet fear, the kind that comes from realizing an entire school of advanced practical knowledge, passed down through generations of master builders, can vanish almost without a trace, leaving behind only these silent, impeccable stones as proof it ever existed. The walls do not threaten, they simply endure, asking us how such perfection was achieved and reminding us that the greatest mysteries are often built from the ground up, stone by impossible stone. A seamless wall of stone is a testament to earthly genius, but a single piece of linen has challenged the very boundaries of faith and science. The Shroud of Turin is perhaps the world's most controversial and revered textile, a 14-foot-long cloth that bears the haunting, faint imprint of a man who appears to have suffered the injuries of crucifixion. For millions, this is not merely an archaeological artifact. It is a sacred object believed by tradition to be the actual burial shroud of Jesus of Nazareth. For the scientists and historians tasked with studying it, however, the shroud presents a dilemma that is as intellectually terrifying as it is spiritually charged. It exists in a liminal space where empirical evidence collides with centuries of profound devotion, creating a pressure few other relics can match. The fear it inspires is not of a curse, but of a responsibility so immense it can feel paralyzing. The fear of reaching a definitive conclusion about an object that symbolizes ultimate mystery. The image on the cloth is eerily specific. It is a sepia-toned, negative imprint of a bearded man with wounds consistent with the accounts of the crucifixion, including marks on the wrists and feet, what appears to be a lance wound to the side, and countless small punctures around the scalp. The figure is not painted on. The coloration is a superficial change in the linen fibers themselves, as if the cloth was somehow exposed to a brief, intense burst of energy that left this ghostly photograph. This level of detail is what first gave researchers pause. A medieval forger would have needed an understanding of photographic negatives centuries before the invention of photography, and a knowledge of Roman crucifixion practices that archaeology itself was only beginning to uncover. The shroud seemed to know things its creator should not have known, a fact that sent a chill through the scientific teams invited to examine it. This tension reached its peak with the radiocarbon dating tests conducted in 1988. Small samples from a corner of the shroud were analyzed by 3 independent laboratories, and their results converged on a date range between the late 13th and mid-14th centuries. To many, this was a clear verdict: the shroud was a medieval creation. Yet for others, and for some of the researchers involved, the story was not so simple. Questions arose about the sample site, potentially from a repaired section, and about the effect of a fire in the 1500s that could have altered the carbon signature. The scientific certainty of the test was met with an equally certain cultural and historical uncertainty. This conflict is the core of the shroud's terrifying power. It forces a stark choice between 2 equally frightening possibilities. On one hand, if it is authentic, then science is confronted with a physical phenomenon it cannot explain. a moment of transfiguration or resurrection energy literally etched into fabric, challenging the foundations of material understanding. On the other hand, if it is a forgery, then it is a deception of such sublime and inexplicable genius that its method remains unreplicated to this day, a medieval mystery that mocks modern technology. Thus, the shroud scares researchers not with a threat, but with an impossible weight. It is an artifact that refuses to be merely historical. To analyze it is to step into a charged field where every observation is scrutinized through lenses of belief and skepticism. The cloth becomes a mirror, reflecting back our own deepest questions about evidence, meaning, and the limits of human knowledge. It stands as a permanent question, a silent challenge from the past that asks us not just who made it, but what we are truly prepared to believe about the intersection of the physical world and the stories that give our history its deepest meaning. A single coin can carry the weight of an entire forgotten voyage. On a coastal site in Maine, a location known as the Goddard Site, an amateur archaeologist sifting through soil in the 1950s made a discovery that seemed laughably out of place. Among the stone tools and pottery fragments of a pre-Columbian Native American settlement, his fingers closed around a small, silver disc. Brushing away the dirt, he revealed a coin, but not one from any known colonial mint. Experts who later examined it were stunned to identify it as a Norse penny, minted between 1065 and 1080 during the height of Viking exploration. This solitary artifact, now called the Maine Penny, became a source of deep and unsettling controversy for historians. Its presence on the other side of the Atlantic, far from any known Viking settlement in Newfoundland, suggested a story of contact that was terrifyingly brief and impossibly lonely. The fear it sparked was not of a dramatic encounter, but of a whisper, a single data point in a vast ocean of silence that threatened to rewrite the narrative of the New World. This coin was not found at Elance Aux Meadows, the established Norse site in Canada. It was discovered over 1,000 miles further south, nestled among the remains of a thriving Penobscot ancestral community that dated from the 12th to the 15th centuries. For archaeologists, this context was everything, and it was what made the coin so profoundly scary. It implied that Norse explorers, or perhaps their trade goods, traveled much further along the North American coastline than any saga or archaeological evidence had previously confirmed. The thought of a single Viking gnar, its dragon prow slicing through the fog off the coast of Maine, making fleeting contact with indigenous peoples before vanishing back into the Atlantic mists, is a haunting image. It suggests not a failed colonization, but a series of sporadic, lost explorations that left almost no trace. The terror of the Maine Penny lies in its isolation. It is a solitary witness. There is no accompanying Norse jewelry, no broken weapons, no evidence of a settlement or even a campsite. It is one coin in a sea of indigenous artifacts. This raises frightening questions about the nature of historical evidence. How many other brief, ephemeral contacts occurred throughout history that left only a single, easily dismissed object behind? The coin forces experts to confront the fragility of the past and the possibility that our maps of exploration are not wrong, but simply incomplete, missing countless minor threads that never wove into the larger tapestry. Skeptics argue it could be a hoax or a coin brought over by a much later European collector and accidentally dropped at the site. Yet, the metallurgical analysis adds another layer of chilling plausibility. The silver content and minting style are consistent with Norse coins of the period, and it shows where patterns suggesting it was in circulation for some time before being lost. This tiny, worn piece of silver becomes a ghost of a transaction, a purchase or a gift exchanged on a shoreline 12 centuries ago. It embodies the fear of connections that are tantalizingly sparse, of a history that is not a solid line but a series of faint, almost invisible dots. We are left to wonder, was this penny part of a larger, forgotten trade network, or was it a solitary souvenir from a chance meeting between two worlds? The Maine Penny does not provide answers, it only amplifies the silence around it, reminding us that the ocean's history is written in stories, most of which sank without a trace. Buried within rock formed before the rise of complex life, a miner's discovery defied all logic. In the mineral-rich deposits of South Africa, workers excavating a material called pyrophyllite, which is used for carving, began to uncover strange metallic objects embedded deep within the stone. These were not random nodules or crystals, but near-perfect spheres, many with 3 parallel grooves etched cleanly around their equators, as if machined on a lathe. The rock layer from which they were pried is part of the Precambrian strata, dated to a staggering 2.8 billion years old. For the geologists and archaeologists who later examined them, a cold, rational fear took hold. These grooved spheres, often called the Klerksdorp Spheres, looked unmistakably manufactured, yet they originated from an era when Earth's most advanced life forms were little more than microscopic bacteria in a primordial sea. This single fact placed them in a terrifying category of their own, artifacts from a time before artifacts should exist. The immediate terror was one of context. There is no known natural geological process that produces metallic spheres with such symmetrical, parallel grooves. The spheres are composed of either hematite or wollastonite with a nickel-steel alloy, materials that can occur naturally, but their form screams of design. They are often found in clusters, and some show a fine, fibrous structure within the metal that seems to have grown in a controlled pattern. To the scientists holding them, the cognitive dissonance was profound. The objects felt like components from a machine, bearings or gyroscopes from an unimaginably ancient technology, sealed away in stone for eons. The fear was not of a supernatural entity, but of a scientific anomaly so glaring it threatened to unravel the foundational narrative of life's history on our planet. It forced a horrifying either-or proposition. Either there is a completely unknown, hyper-precise natural phenomenon at work, one that mimics industrial design with eerie accuracy, or these spheres are evidence of a technological presence on Earth billions of years before the first dinosaurs, let alone the first human toolmakers. This is where the mystery turns truly chilling for researchers. The possibility of an unknown natural process is unsettling enough, as it reveals a gap in our understanding of Earth's ancient chemistry and physics. But the alternative, the suggestion of an ancient, non-human intelligence, is a concept that induces a kind of intellectual vertigo. It proposes a timeline of technological development so alien and so deeply buried that it makes all of recorded human history seem like the final page of a billion-year-old book. Were these objects left by a civilization that rose and fell in the deep geological past, leaving only these enigmatic spheres as fossils of their industry? Could they be remnants of a visit from elsewhere, discarded or lost in an era when our world was still young? The spheres do not answer, they only sit in museum drawers, silent and inscrutable, radiating a quiet challenge to our anthropocentric view of history. Skeptics offer explanations that try to pull the spheres back into the known world. Some propose they are concretions, mineral accumulations that can form spherical shapes in sedimentary rock, with the grooves being the result of later mineral crystallization along lines of weakness. Others suggest they could be the fossilized remains of ancient microbial colonies that created unusual mineral structures. Yet for many who have held the spheres and felt the precision of those grooves, these explanations feel like a desperate attempt to fit a square peg into a round hole of immense age. The objects resist easy categorization, which is the source of their enduring power to unsettle. They represent the ultimate outlier, a data point that refuses to be smoothed into the curve of accepted science. They are a whisper from the abyss of deep time, a reminder that the Earth's memory is long, and we have only just begun to learn how to read it. deep time holds its secrets in stone, but a tomb from a more recent, yet equally formidable, past holds its breath entirely. In central China, beneath a vast man-made mound of earth, lies the sealed necropolis of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor who unified the nation over 2,000 years ago. This is not merely a burial site, it is an entire underground empire, a monument to one man's quest for eternal power that has remained deliberately unopened for millennia. While the famous terracotta army, discovered in pits surrounding the mound, has captivated the world, the central tomb itself exerts a far more potent and fearful pull on the archaeological imagination. It is a place where awe and dread exist in equal measure, a sleeping dragon of history that no one dares to fully awaken. The scale of the complex is the first source of this profound respect. Historical texts describe a subterranean palace with ceilings inlaid with pearls to mimic the stars and rivers and seas modeled in flowing mercury. The emperor's body was said to rest in a bronze sarcophagus, surrounded by untold treasures and the tools of his administration, ensuring he could rule forever in the afterlife. The terracotta army, over 8,000 strong, stands as his eternal imperial guard just outside the palace walls. This vision is not of a resting place, but of a sovereign's defiant refusal to accept the end, an act of monumental will frozen in time. For the archaeologists who have mapped the perimeter, the fear of opening the tomb is multifaceted and deeply practical. Ancient chronicles warn of ingenious mechanical crossbows set to fire automatically at any intruder, and of vast quantities of liquid mercury used to create those legendary flowing rivers. Modern scientific surveys have detected alarmingly high concentrations of mercury in the soil over the tomb, confirming the ancient accounts and presenting a terrifying, toxic reality. The thought of breaching a chamber that has concentrated this poisonous element for 22 centuries is a sobering deterrent. It is not a fear of myth, but a rational fear of a very real environmental hazard that could endanger any research team and potentially leak into the surrounding ecosystem. Beyond the physical dangers lies an even heavier ethical weight. Opening the first emperor's tomb would be an irreversible act, a violation of a site sealed at the peak of its cultural and artistic creation. The conditions inside, potentially oxygen-free and stabilized for millennia, could preserve organic materials, silks, texts, and wooden artifacts in pristine condition, only to have them disintegrate upon exposure to modern air, a loss that would be an unforgivable tragedy for world heritage. This responsibility creates a paralyzing reverence, a collective decision by the global archaeological community to let the sleeping emperor lie. The tomb, therefore, becomes the ultimate paradox, a treasure trove of knowledge that we are too respectful and too afraid to fully claim. It represents a sealed capsule of ancient paranoia and ambition, a time capsule whose very preservation is a kind of curse, keeping its secrets eternally out of reach. The respectful terror it inspires is not of a supernatural vengeance, but of our own limitations. We are faced with the humbling realization that some doors, once opened, cannot be closed, and some stories are meant to remain in the dark, their full telling a mystery that future generations, with more advanced and delicate technologies, may one day dare to approach. For now, the mound stands quiet, a silent testament to power so immense it commanded an army of clay and a river of poison to defend its eternal silence. While ancient tombs guard secrets of emperors, a monument from our own time delivered its message in plain sight, only to be shattered for its clarity. In the quiet farmlands of Elbert County, Georgia, a set of towering granite slabs appeared almost overnight. Erected in 1979 under a veil of strict anonymity, the Georgia Guidestones stood nearly 20 feet tall, inscribed with 10 principles for a future age in 8 of the world's major languages. To the locals and the few visitors who first encountered them, these stark, gray monoliths were not a relic of the distant past, but a chilling artifact from the modern world, a megalithic manifesto that felt both eerily prescient and deeply unsettling. The messages carved into the stone advocated for a new age of reason, calling for global harmony, careful stewardship of nature, and a guiding of reproduction to improve human fitness. It was this last point, phrased as a call to maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature, that sent a cold ripple of fear through those who read it. The world's population at the time was over 4 billion, and the mathematical implication of that guideline carried a terrifying, apocalyptic overtone. The Guidestones did not feel like a historical curiosity. They felt like a blueprint anonymously delivered for a radically different and drastically reduced future. The profound fear they inspired stemmed directly from their unknown origin. A man using the pseudonym R.C. Christian had commissioned the monument, claiming to represent a small group of loyal Americans, but their true identities and motives remained locked in shadow. This anonymity transformed the stones from a philosophical statement into something far more ominous. Without a known author, the messages felt detached, impersonal, and absolute, as if they were commandments handed down not from a deity, but from a hidden, technocratic cabal with a long-term vision for reshaping civilization itself. The precision of the monument's astronomy added to this cult-like mystique, with slots and holes aligned to track the sun's solstices and equinoxes, and a small hole in the central pillar that pointed to the North Star. This fusion of New Age idealism, cold population mathematics, and celestial alignment made the Guidestones a focal point for conspiracy theories and deep unease. They were a modern stone circle preaching a gospel of rationalism that, to many, felt chillingly devoid of human emotion. Their story took a violent turn decades later, transforming mystery into modern legend. In 2022, the Guidestones were severely damaged in a series of attacks, first by vandalism with graffiti, and then catastrophically by an explosive device that toppled one of the massive slabs. The remaining structure was deemed unsafe and completely demolished shortly after. This destruction did not erase the fear the monument represented, it compounded it. The act of vandalism felt like a physical rejection of the Guidestones' cold message, a backlash against the anonymous future they outlined. Yet, in their ruined state, they became an even more potent symbol. They now represented the deep cultural schisms of our time, the fear of hidden agendas, and the violent conflict between one group's vision for a controlled, rational future and another's defense against what they perceived as a sinister utopia. The rubble left behind asks a haunting question: was this the end of a mysterious prophecy, or was the destruction itself part of some larger, unseen plan? The Georgia Guidestones stand, or rather lay, as a stark reminder that the most frightening artifacts are not always those we dig up from ancient soil, but those we plant there ourselves, inscribed with messages for a future we may be too afraid to build. A book so large it was said to require 2 people to lift it, and a legend so dark it seemed to seep from its very pages. In a Benedictine monastery in medieval Bohemia, the Codex Gigas, or the Devil's Bible, was created. This single manuscript is a world unto itself, a massive volume weighing nearly 165 pounds, bound in leather over wooden boards. Its dimensions alone inspire a kind of solemn dread, but it is the stories woven around its creation that truly chilled the historians who first studied it. According to enduring lore, the Codex was the work of a single monk, a scribe who had broken his monastic vows and was sentenced to be walled up alive. In desperation, he promised to create a work that would glorify the monastery forever, a book containing all human knowledge, if only he could be granted one night to complete it. As midnight approached and the task proved impossible, the monk prayed not to his God but to the fallen angel Lucifer, offering his soul in exchange for help. The devil completed the manuscript, and in gratitude, the monk added a full-page portrait of his benefactor, forever binding the holy and the unholy within one cover. This tale, whether a moral fable or a whispered truth, imbued the physical book with an aura of profound and terrifying duality. For scholars, the fear was not of a literal curse, but of confronting a medieval mindset where the divine and the demonic were intimate, warring realities. The Codex Gigas is a complete library in one volume. It contains the entire Latin Vulgate Bible, historical works by scholars like Josephus, medical texts, a calendar of saints, and local historical records. This comprehensive gathering of knowledge makes its most famous feature all the more unsettling. On page 290, facing a magnificent depiction of the heavenly city, is a full-page illustration of the devil himself. He is portrayed as a large, solitary figure, crouched and alone in a void of red parchment, with clawed hands and feet, 2 short horns, and an expression of grim, almost melancholy power. This visual juxtaposition is the heart of its chilling effect. The devil is not hidden in the margins as a doodle or a warning. He is given equal artistic standing to the kingdom of heaven, placed deliberately within a sacred text. This inclusion forced historians to grapple with a complex and uncomfortable medieval psychology, one that did not simply reject evil but studied it, depicted it, and perhaps even sought to understand its place within a divine order. The manuscript thus becomes a physical embodiment of a spiritual struggle, a tome that contains both the cure and the poison. The technical marvel of the Codex only deepens the mystery. Analysis suggests it is indeed the work of a single scribe, written in a remarkably consistent hand over what was likely 20 years of dedicated labor, not a single night. Yet the legend persists because it explains the unexplainable, the sheer human effort, and the unsettling cohabitation of light and dark within one work. To hold this book, or even to stand before it, is to feel the weight of an era's deepest anxieties. It represents the fear of knowledge itself, of the line between pious study and forbidden inquiry, and the haunting possibility that to understand the sacred fully, one might have to stare directly into the face of its opposite. The Devil's Bible does not threaten with magic, it unsettles with meaning. It is a relic of a time when faith was a battlefield, and this massive, silent book stands as one of its most permanent and eerie monuments. The unsettling marriage of sacred and profane in a manuscript gives way to a more primal fear, one carved in clay and unearthed from the very cradle of civilization. In the dusty soil of southern Iraq, at a site called Tel El-Ubaid, archaeologists uncovered a collection of figurines that made even seasoned experts pause. These were not the expected images of gods or animals, but something profoundly other. Dating back over 7,000 years, these statues depict humanoid figures with unmistakably reptilian features, elongated heads, slanted almond-shaped eyes, and slender bodies that seem to slither even in solid clay. Some hold infants with similar features, while others are posed in what appears to be a posture of reverence or worship. To hold one is to feel a disconnect, a jarring sense that the artists of this ancient Ubaid culture were depicting a reality or a belief that has no place in our known world. The fear they sparked was not of a curse, but of a cognitive rift, the realization that these people were venerating, or perhaps even living alongside, beings we cannot categorize. These lizard-like figures are rendered with a careful, deliberate artistry that suggests they were important, not accidental. They wear simple shoulder padding and often have a bitumen-like substance applied to their heads, perhaps representing hair or a headdress. Their poses are human, engaged in recognizably human activities like nursing a child or clasping hands, yet their faces are utterly alien. This fusion of the familiar and the monstrous is what creates such a deep sense of unease. For the archaeologists who catalogued them, the immediate and terrifying question was, what were they looking at? Were these representations of deities, a pantheon of lizard gods who watched over the dawn of agriculture and settlement? Could they be stylized shamans wearing ritual masks and costumes to embody a totemic animal spirit? Or do they point to something more unsettling, a folk memory of an encounter with an unknown, possibly now extinct, species of intelligent reptile? The latter idea, while speculative, taps into a profound and primal fear, the fear of the other. These figurines suggest a mythology, or perhaps a lived experience, where humans were not the only advanced beings shaping their world. The thought that another sentient species could have shared the planet with early humanity, influencing their art and beliefs before vanishing from the ecological record, is a concept that challenges our anthropocentric view of history. It evokes legends and modern tales of reptilian beings, not as fiction, but as a possible echo of a prehistoric truth. The figurines become terrifying not for what they are, but for the door they crack open in our imagination, a door leading to a past where the rules of life were different. They force us to consider that the stories we dismiss as myth might be the faded history of a world we have forgotten. Ultimately, whether gods, metaphors, or memories, the Ubaid lizardmen stand as a silent testament to the complexity of early human thought. They remind us that 7 millennia ago, people looked at the world and saw in it possibilities that still have the power to unsettle us today. Their legacy is a question etched in clay, asking us how well we truly understand the inner lives and outer realities of our most ancient ancestors. What other forms of intelligence, real or imagined, shared the stage with humanity in those early dawns? The unsettling visage of ancient reptilian figures carved in clay gives way to a mystery of dazzling, cold perfection. Among the most captivating and controversial artifacts to emerge from the shadows of history are the crystal skulls, objects of breathtaking beauty that carry a whisper of profound unease. These life-sized carvings, most often made from clear or milky quartz, began circulating in the 19th century, presented as relics of lost Mesoamerican civilizations like the Maya or the Aztecs. They were said to possess mystical properties, from healing energies to the ability to show visions of the past and future. For a time, they were celebrated as wonders of the ancient world, symbols of a spiritual and technological sophistication that defied the era of their supposed creation. Yet, as these glittering objects found their way into museum collections and private holdings, a deep and troubling question began to form in the minds of researchers. This was not a fear of magic, but a fear of origins, a chilling uncertainty about whether they were gazing upon a miracle of lost knowledge or the most brilliant archaeological deception ever conceived. The terror these skulls inspire in serious scholars stems from this perfect ambiguity. While many skulls have been definitively exposed as modern fakes, crafted with 19th century jewelers' tools, a handful of specimens resist easy explanation. The most famous of these, like the Mitchell-Hedges skull, exhibit features that are genuinely perplexing. Made from a single, flawless block of quartz, they show no visible tool marks, even under magnification. The jawbone is often a separate piece, yet it fits with a precision that suggests a technology beyond simple hand carving. The crystalline structure is oriented in a way that would have been incredibly difficult to achieve without shattering the entire piece, implying an understanding of the stone's natural properties that seems impossibly advanced for any pre-Columbian culture we know. For an archaeologist, this presents a terrifying either-or scenario. Either these objects are proof of a forgotten, hyper-advanced lapidary technology, a method of shaping stone with sound or some form of lost chemistry that has left no other trace, or they are hoaxes of such sublime skill that they mock our very ability to discern truth from fiction. This blurring of the line between archaeology and mythology is where the crystal skulls find their most potent power to unsettle. They exist in a liminal space, physical objects that have become vessels for our deepest fantasies and fears about the past. They inspire a fear not of the skull itself, but of the epistemological void it represents. If they are real, then our historical timeline is missing a chapter on precision engineering that rivals our own. If they are fakes, then they represent a different kind of loss, the erosion of trust and the haunting possibility that some of the most beautiful artifacts we use to define ancient cultures are elaborate lies. They force us to confront how easily ore can be manufactured, and how our desire for mystery can sometimes outpace our commitment to evidence. The skulls thus become mirrors, reflecting back our own yearning for a past that is more magical, more connected, and more technologically mysterious than the one the conventional record provides. They are artifacts that captivate precisely because they cannot be fully claimed by either science or myth, forever suspended in a glittering, silent question. From the glittering artifice of crystal skulls, we turn to a discovery that is unnervingly, undeniably real. Deep within a cave system on Mount Owen in New Zealand, cavers made a find that felt less like archaeology and more like stepping into a lost world. In a dry, sheltered crevice, their lights fell upon a massive, gnarled claw, complete with sharp talons and, most shockingly, patches of desiccated skin and sinewy muscle tissue still clinging to the bone. This was not a fossil turned to stone, but a piece of a creature that looked as if it had died only weeks before. In reality, it belonged to a giant moa, an extinct flightless bird that had vanished from the islands over 500 years ago, and the claw itself was over 3,000 years old. For the paleontologists who later held it, this was not a moment of triumph, but one of profound and visceral dread. The claw defied every expectation of decay. Normally, soft tissues like skin and muscle are the first to go, consumed by bacteria and time, leaving behind only skeletal remains. Yet here was a piece of a prehistoric animal preserved with a freshness that felt impossible. It offered a tangible, almost living connection to a creature that should exist only in textbooks and bone fragments. To touch it was to feel the texture of a lost era, and that immediacy sparked a primal fear, the fear of a collapsed timeline. It was as if the giant moa, a bird that stood over 12 feet tall and weighed hundreds of pounds, had wandered into the cave mere moments before, leaving this piece of itself behind as it vanished around a dark corner. This artifact did not whisper of ancient mysteries, it screamed of a recent and absolute ending. The claw forced a confrontation with the raw, sudden reality of extinction. The moa were not mythical beasts lost in deep time. They were a dominant part of New Zealand's ecosystem until the arrival of Polynesian settlers. Their disappearance was rapid, a consequence of human activity and environmental change. Holding that perfectly preserved claw made that abstract historical fact terrifyingly concrete. It was a relic of a world that was thriving just a few centuries ago, a world that is now permanently silent. The fear it evokes is not of a monster, but of absence, of the eerie quiet that follows a final footstep. It reminds us that extinction is not always a slow fade over millions of years. It can be a swift and recent event, leaving behind echoes as fresh as a claw in a cave. This discovery shifts our perspective from studying the deep past to mourning a very recent loss. The claw becomes a silent, powerful testament to fragility. It asks us to look at the world around us and wonder what other living wonders we take for granted today might, in a surprisingly short time, exist only as strangely fresh remains in some forgotten place, waiting for a future explorer to stumble upon them and feel the same chill of a door that has just closed forever. These artifacts share a common, unsettling power, a capacity to reach across centuries and provoke a genuine shiver. This fear is not merely about old bones or strange objects. It is a deeper reaction to what these finds represent, a confrontation with the unknown that challenges the very foundations of how we understand our world. At its core, the terror evoked by these discoveries stems from a few powerful, recurring themes that tap into both our scientific minds and our most primal instincts. First and foremost, these finds force us to question the stories we tell ourselves about the past. We build historical narratives like secure frameworks, timelines of progress and understanding that give our existence a sense of order and meaning. A hammer sealed in 100-million-year-old rock or a battery from 2 millennia ago does not simply add a new fact to that framework. It acts like a seismic tremor, threatening to collapse the entire structure. This creates a profound cognitive dissonance in the researcher, a mental conflict where hard evidence directly contradicts deeply held, accepted truths. The fear is intellectual vertigo, the terrifying realization that the map of history we have been confidently using might be missing entire continents of experience. It is the fear of being wrong on a fundamental level, of having to rebuild our understanding from the ground up. Closely linked to this is the haunting specter of lost knowledge. The Antikythera Mechanism or the seamless walls of Sacsayhuamán are not just impressive, they are evidence of sophistication that seems to vanish without a trace. This suggests that entire schools of advanced science, engineering, or spiritual insight can rise, flourish, and be completely erased from human memory. For a civilization that prides itself on the accumulation and preservation of information, this is a uniquely chilling thought. It implies that our current technological age is not an inevitable peak, but merely one point on a long and fragile curve, and that dark ages can swallow centuries of innovation whole. The fear is of our own fragility, the understanding that the light of knowledge can be extinguished, leaving behind only enigmatic fragments as clues to a forgotten brilliance. Then there are the finds that bypass our intellect to speak directly to our emotions, touching on universal human taboos and mysteries. The contorted face of unknown man E is not frightening because it is old, but because it is a raw, preserved moment of human agony. It forces us to confront the physical reality of a long-ago individual's final moments, erasing the comfortable distance of time and making their terror immediate. Similarly, artifacts linked to ceremonial practices or final resting places carry the weight of ancient beliefs about what lies beyond. They remind us that every culture has grappled with the same profound questions of mortality, the divine, and the supernatural. When we uncover their tools for this grappling, we are not just studying artifacts, we are handling the physical embodiments of hope, fear, and reverence. This connection to the emotional and spiritual life of the past can be deeply unnerving, as it reminds us that these long-gone people were as vividly alive and complex as we are, with their own dreads and devotions. Ultimately, what truly unites these 20 discoveries is their power to unsettle our modern certainty. We live in an age of answers, where science and reason promise explanations for nearly everything. These artifacts defy that promise. They are the unanswered questions, the locked doors, the silent witnesses to histories we can no longer hear. They provoke a duality within us, a tension between scientific curiosity that demands an explanation and a more primal, instinctual dread of the inexplicable. They remind us that the past is not a neatly solved puzzle in a museum case, but a living, breathing realm of unresolved mysteries. Each one is a whisper from the shadows of time, suggesting that there is far more to our story than we have yet dared to imagine, and that some truths once buried might be meant to stay that way. These 20 discoveries are not merely footnotes in a textbook, they are cracks in the foundation of history itself. Each one, from the silent scream in the tomb to the perfect sphere in the jungle, serves as a stark reminder that the past we think we know is a fragile reconstruction, a story pieced together from fragments while whole libraries of experience have turned to dust. What unites them is their power to pull back a thin veil, revealing not answers but deeper, more resonant questions. They expose the unsettling enigma that lies just beneath the surface of every accepted timeline, challenging our confidence in a linear, fully comprehensible narrative. The genuine fear reported by the archaeologists who first laid hands on these objects is perhaps the most human element of all. It was not a childish fear of ghosts, but a profound emotional collision. The dizzying moment when scholarly wonder meets the visceral chill of the inexplicable. This is the raw weight of discovery, where the thrill of uncovering truth intertwines with the terror of realizing that some truths redefine reality itself. They remind us that to explore the past is to walk a line between enlightenment and awe, to hold evidence in your hands that whispers of worlds and capabilities we can scarcely imagine. Let this journey be an invitation to look at history not as a settled record, but as a living, breathing mystery. Question the stories you have been told. Look at the ancient walls, the old maps, and the unearthed tools with a sense of wonder for all that remains unsaid. Appreciate that for every artifact displayed in a museum's bright light, there are countless others still buried, holding their secrets in the dark, waiting to reshape our understanding once more. We would love to hear which of these mysterious finds unsettled you the most, or which mystery you feel captures the fragile nature of the past. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you are drawn to these hidden corners of history, subscribe for more journeys into the shadows of time, where every discovery is a step into the unknown.